Welcome, everybody, to this next episode of the Finding Your Flock podcast. I'm very, very excited for today's session of what it could bring. There's lots of opportunity and potential. We're very lucky to have Monika with us today. Monika's got an extensive background in human connection and humanity, as well as like a previous life before she got there, until she started discovering these pieces, and also an experience with an organization called the House of Beautiful Business, which she helped grow to what it is today, and she's still very close with that. So interesting to take some insight into that. So yeah, with that, I'll hand it over to you, Monika. Maybe give us a brief intro to let everyone know like where you came from, what you're working on now, and we can go from there.
Sounds great. Thank you so much. Gosh. Really happy to be here. Yes, where to start? I have a background in communications and media, and thought I will, for the rest of my life, kind of work in marketing and for big brand agencies or something like that. I tried that. I also worked in corporate environments very, very early on, like during my studies, and I found that the corporate environment is not for me necessarily, and it kind of sparked, when I was 20 something at the time, it sparked kind of my curiosity around the future of work at that time. That's how I eventually ended up at the House of Beautiful Business, really to reimagine work, the role of business, and also the role of humans and what it means to be human, right? In an age of machines, we said back in 2017, and now with AI being so and generative AI being so prominent in our lives, many things have changed, and still the question is the same. So fast forward, after 5 years of helping to build the House of Beautiful Business, as you said, I'm now focused on kind of building community around loneliness as a shared human experience, and at the same time as a personal, collective, and also political issue of our times. So in many ways, I feel like loneliness is our zeitgeist, and it mirrors a lot of the issues and pains that people feel or suppress, and it is a direct effect from this individualistic culture that is at least very prominent in most Western industrial societies, right, of today, and the reason why we ended up here. So in exploring that, I hope to reconnect people, to, and with that also myself, I guess, of course, to ourselves, but also each other and something larger, community, universe, whatever you want to call it. Yeah.
You've thrown me off a little bit. I had a planned question to start off with, and I'm going to change that because you said something, and I just have to extend on it, because you said you're building out a community around loneliness, and it's a discussion I've had with my peer group, with my colleagues. There is this, I wouldn't say stigma around the word loneliness, but a misunderstanding what the term loneliness means. I think people have an image of loneliness being me sitting by a window in a dark, rainy day and sitting all sad and having nothing to go to, but it's quite broader than that. So maybe just from your perspective, how would you define loneliness? And because the one thing, when you said building a community around loneliness, people don't self-identify as lonely. I don't think it's not like, oh, hey, by the way, I'm lonely, because it's seen as like something you should suppress, like mental health, or like you shouldn't talk about it. And we're only starting to get used to the talking about loneliness. So what's your view on how you would best describe it? When someone's like, oh, I'm not lonely, what do you say? Like, do you know what lonely is? Like, how would you explain that?
Yeah, I think it's so ironic, because like modern loneliness is this paradox, right, of not being alone, sitting at the window on a rainy day by yourself, but being surrounded, at a conference, hundreds of people, or being surrounded by lots of strangers in the subway, in the metro, wherever, where you're headed, and being kind of like completely disconnected because you can't handle all of the stimulation that's happening around you. So in many ways, it's kind of feeling alone despite of being so connected, so hyper connected and digitally connected, right? Seeing what your friends are posting on social media, or your so-called friends or connections, having thousands of followers, but no one to call if you need someone, to talk to about that you had a tough day, right? Or that you need someone to feed your cat or whatever, water your plants. It's like literally that level. So to go a little bit maybe deeper into the definition of loneliness, I like to pull out some nuances. So there is this notion of social loneliness, which is kind of this gap of perceived, or like the connections that I have in my life and the connections that I would like to have in my life. That gap, right, is sort of social loneliness. So I wish I had more friends, for example, generally speaking. Then there's kind of this emotional part of it, which is I actually have a lot of great connections in my life, but I wish that they would go deeper. So there's kind of this sense for, I long for more emotional intimacy, right? For a trusted one in my life, a close person that I can call, that I can rely on. And then there's something interesting about kind of this almost existential kind of loneliness. That is this sense of, I want to belong to something greater. I want to feel like I'm part of something vast. And in the earlier days, I guess that was largely what church and religion did. And if you ask, for example, religious people, right, or faith-based communities, they will say, like, I never feel lonely, because I'm always connected to God, to a higher power. Similarly, I guess now with modern spirituality, people, would say that perhaps, but it's a little bit different. So I think there's also kind of, almost existential kind of loneliness that people long for. Yeah.
So this definitely not going to be enough time for today, but we're going to try. I can resonate with the feeling alone despite being so connected, just from a London perspective, right? You can be sitting on the tube,
Yeah.
everyone's got their AirPods in, they're watching a Netflix or whatever, they're doing something. Same as you can be walking down the street. I mean, Oxford Street is like 6 meters wide, and there can be hundreds of people you're walking past, and no one cares about anyone but themselves, right? That's just the society and the culture of London. Is a very fast-paced, go, 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 go environment. And when I first came here, I moved to London, I had to find something to ground me, right? I had some family, which was fine, but then what I essentially seeked out was, I'm from South Africa. Are there other South Africans in the area that, right? And I found some South Africans that I knew through a friend, and slowly but surely, we did some sports on the weekend, and I had a kind of sense of belonging that I could look forward to one thing on the week. And on the Sunday, I was going to go play Frisbee with them on the Hampstead Heath, right? And I think, I don't know if it's a societal thing or a technology thing, social media thing, but I suppose less and less of that is happening because people want to try and aren't willing to go and do those sort of, maybe it's changing a little bit now, but finding a sense of belonging takes work.
Yes.
It's not something that people are going to come and seek you out for. And that's that circle of mental health. Like it's a growing circle. You don't go out, so you feel more alone, but you need to go out to feel less alone. It's like a chicken and egg kind of scenario, which I can resonate with, and I know friends that can resonate with that. So how do you encourage individuals to take that first step? I wish I had more friends, or the emotional loneliness one, I think, is a completely separate topic. So I'll just stick with I need more connections, even if they're shallow, but I just need more connections.
Yeah, I guess the first step before saying I need more connections is to think about what kind of connections do I actually want, because what you said about finding belonging and building that sense of belonging takes time. That is so true. And the step before that, right, is it's the same as with relationships or any kinds of connections. Like, it takes time, especially if you're building out new ones. So to think a little bit about, okay, what are some, in your case, it was not just common interest, but also like cultural, sharedness there, or like other ways, right, that we connect through a love for like universal things, like type of music, type of food. I mean, these are like very sports for sure. These are very universal common denominators, I think, which you can seek out and say for yourself, okay, whom do I ideally want to connect with, without the expectation like I'm going to find like my next 3 best friends this next weekend. Like that's probably not going to happen. But to go with that intention, into seeking out groups, seeking out, and now there's tons of offerings because of this loneliness crisis that we're in, right? Of like new social clubs, new kind of sense of, we'll go on a walk on a Sunday, you can come. There's like dinners with strangers, you can sign up. It has never been so easy in many ways to sign up for these things in your city, go to a meetup, go to an event. But the point I'm trying to make is like, go with an intention before you go, and don't overload yourself with 300 events in the next month, especially if you're on the introverted side, and also if you're generally just trying to manage your energy. And then go with an open attitude and say, okay, if I can get myself to speak to one person, like approach one person with a question or something that interests me, a compliment, like I'm doing that just as a challenge with myself, then that is already amazing. And see what happens, right? Go with that curiosity, rather than putting on pressure of like, have to come back with 5 new amazing connections in another WhatsApp group, or whatever. Yeah.
To be fair, like, this is something that I'm still working on myself, right? I go to conferences, and I was at a conference like, last week, the week before that. And you go to the bathroom, or you go and grab a drink, and you come back, and all you see are these little groups, these little pods. And you're like, what should I do? Like, should I go and break into that pod, or should I go and like, that is quite, depending on your personality. I did find myself walking around the room once or twice before I went to a pod, right? Because I was now injecting myself into a scenario that people already established. Most of the time I went there and I just stood there and like kind of like slowly engaged in the conversation. But that takes a lot of emotional strength, emotional energy. Some people might not have even, you have to have some sense of confidence. So maybe I think where I'm going towards is, there are some challenges, right, to taking that first step. What do you see as some of those challenges being? And that's like you just said, it's a conundrum that you're saying it's never been easier to go to a meetup group, to go for a running club, bar crawl, whatever that is. It's never been easier. You can just Google it and you'll find something, right? But why don't people do it? Like, what is that barrier? What is that challenge?
Yeah, I think the challenge is that a lot of these things are not designed well. And I'm going to just say that, so bluntly, because I really mean it. And I've been to many of these things. You go to a new city, then you go to a language exchange. Like there's so many ways, right? You can now online go to meetups, and very, very few are designed and held and facilitated, full stop, and then facilitated well. That's just it. It's just like people are like, oh, it's going to be enough to make a reservation at a restaurant or whatever, or as a space, and then just put out a post on LinkedIn, and then people will just come, and then just self-organize, whatever. And yes, of course, people will always come in a space, and there will always be people who will be comfortable in just dominating the space and like get a conversation going, use it for themselves, right? Because they're like, okay, taking advantage of this, why not? And at the same time, there will be a lot of people who will be like, what is this? Like, I thought there would be, a little bit of guidance how to go about this. Because let's not forget that the pandemic has definitely left a big mark, like collective trauma. I would say that in terms of that experience as a way of how we already before the pandemic have been seeing, loneliness, crisis, and people struggling with mental health issues on many levels. But the pandemic has kind of exacerbated everything and made it even harder for us to trust in each other, in institutions, right, and governments and business, and to be in touch with our own difficult emotions or emotions in general, and then approach each other. And then you have like social distancing and human touch and like closeness, like proximity physically. All of these things have become really difficult for people to navigate because we did not learn how to, first of all, never, ever. And also after the pandemic, things have just gone, back in a way, in some sense. And many of these offerings where you can connect, they're not helping in terms of lowering your social anxiety or like, generating a sense of safety, which is the key principle, right? It's just like an open space and you're like, okay, I'm just trying to like survive here and like make some connections and be interesting, right? Like all of these things are not helpful, I think.
I mean, it's quite surreal to hear you say those things, only because in some of the user research that we're doing, some of the people would say, I would go to a bar and say, do you know where I can find this club? Barman would be like, I don't know what you're talking about. And it's that kind of interaction that you're saying, the facilitation, right? Because if you have social anxiety, which a lot of people do and shouldn't be ashamed about it, like it's a real thing, you're not going to be that person that dominates conversation. You almost want someone to welcome you in and introduce you, say, hey, Josh, do you know Monika? Monika's also into red wine. Why don't you guys have a chat? You need that sort of introduction to break the ice for them. But you're right. The tools that are available help create, but not facilitate. Which is, I suppose, I think people, that have these events, all well intended. The intentions are correct, but you're right. I think you say that not everyone is necessarily trained in how to run or facilitate these kinds of things. All intentions put aside. Like I definitely remember when I was like in 18, 19, I think I went to a speed dating event. I'm pretty sure I went to a speed dating event. And I remember like I went with a friend because I didn't want to go alone. And I think he walked in there and there was like hardly anyone there. He just walked straight out. Right? There's also that sense of like, how do I know that the people are there are the people for me? Like there's all these different things that you're trying to filter out that like,
and it's always comforting to go with the person inside, right? Like when you go yourself, it's like an awkward feel of like not direct but indirect rejection of like everybody's gonna go with their friends or someone, and I'm gonna be on my own out there when I go. So you're like, I'm just not gonna go. But when you have a second person, it's just like makes it easier for you to just step in there and go wherever it is. Like even wanting to two potential partners or something, like just when you're with another friend, it's easier to approach because like for humans, it's like I reading a lot about psychology, it's like we always think about what's the worst scenario, right? So it's like always of like you think about walking on your own back with a feel of rejection, right? So like when you're with your friend, it's like okay, it's soothes like that option of like what's the worst can happen, which is quite an interesting subconscious thought process. But I wanted to ask you something. Like I've I know Josh is one of the big advocates of yours, so like that's why it's like he's got a lot in his mind like to share and discuss, which I love it. But I just wanted to. You mentioned at the beginning the AI aspect, right? Generative AI and its impact. Obviously, as the technology keeps going and moving forward, it is impacting our lives in every aspect, right? So I'm just curious to see, like, how do you see the AI's approach on human connection? Is it, a bad thing? Is it a good thing? Is it a gray area that's got it kind of in the middle where it's like, a knife, you can use it to cut bread or, harm someone? So I'm just curious, what is your thought in this, and then reading through your posts, and which I really enjoy, and your newsletter. I'm curious, because I know you mentioned a lot about companionship, right? And you mentioned it at the beginning as well. Like, how do you define companionship?
Such great questions. Thank you. AI. I'm deeply concerned, and I'm incredibly curious and excited at the same time. That's how I feel. I feel, some days are more on that spectrum than some days on the other side of the spectrum. So it depends a little bit. I do think with ChatGPT 4.0, from what I've read and listened to from people who know much more about this space than me, this is in some ways a new level, right, that we're entering in terms of just how wildly accessible this technology is, and how, of course, OpenAI in itself as a company, as a business, is like hugely problematic in terms of, their approaches, their intentions, which I can only, know of so much. But I do want to focus on, just the technology in itself and where it is right now. With an application like ChatGPT 4 that is very human-like and designed in a way that is incredibly human, and with its voice, the way that it speaks, interacts, and so forth, that I'm just very concerned about the effects on how we will be able to connect as humans between each other, right? Or if we will be so geared towards a certain way of interacting with something that is always, very affirming, very positive, very constructive, that always says like, yeah, great, Monika, that's a wonderful idea. Here's the thing that I wanted to share with you. So I think by that we're losing, it's kind of flattened, and not only flattened, but it has like this positivity bias, and it makes connection feel very simple, right? And it feels very much as a service also, which is another aspect that I'm worried about, that you just go and you ask something and something comes back and you expect it to be that easy. And I would rather to have AI services, right, that help us to challenge our biases. And I know that there are ways to do that. I guess I could just, use it maybe to be like, hey, call out my, biases that I have, or like help me to debate this thing with you, or like help me to discern something, so that we are able to rather move back into the depth and the complexity and the messiness of human interaction and connection, which has gotten lost already through social media. So I don't want it to have the same trajectory as social media, but I also know realistically, maybe that's the way that we're going, or already everything is lost. I don't know. I hope not. I hope that AI can help with, helping to create some of these social and even pro-social behaviors, that it can help us train a little bit our emotional, relational intelligence, connect us online, or like train us, online, but then help us to go out in the world. And for example, to go back to the event, and social anxiety, what if I talk to my AI friend, before, and be like, hey, you know what, I'm quite anxious about this because I truly am. I also get very socially anxious. I hate going to like big events and being like, God, everything is so overwhelming. I don't know I don't want to be here, actually. I mean, I do, but I really don't. What if my, AI friend, before I go, helps me to reflect a little bit together? It's like, where does this come from, and how can you approach this? How can we set an intention? And if what's the worst thing that can happen? Let's play through that. How is that really real, right? How realistic is that? And how about we flip that? What's the most positive thing that could happen? Oh yeah, that would be lovely. Like, and tell me about it, when you return. And to help us sort of train this kind of resilience and muscle to also shift a little bit our perspective. So I think there's lots of positive scenarios I can also see. I choose to see with AI. But I have not made my mind up yet about it. We'll see, I guess, how everything unfolds. And I love overall, I have to say that now with this state of AI, that it's sparking so many questions about us as humans and us as, human beings connecting, and what kind of relationships do we want, and how do we distinguish ourselves still in a more humble way, rather than wanting to be even more superior or something than AI. Yeah.
No, I was going to just say that part of, I think Erican's second question to you on how do you define companionship, I think what I struggle with is, because you've had this debate internally a number of times, of what is a friend, right? Because it could be that AI does facilitate some elements of a friend, but the elements that it just can't, right? It can't do physical touch. We know that physical touch is very important from the human psyche, of like, someone's looking out for me, like hunter-gatherer kind of back in the day, living in the bush, like with no one to protect you. So I think innately, when you hear the word friend, people have that concept actually means to them. So I almost feel like it's a retraining of what this actually, a retraining of the word, or creating a new word.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, that's such a good way to challenge it, right? It's exactly what is a friend to you, and how is it that we've become like that we're categorizing friends. Like, there are some of these, I have like some party friends, then I have some really close friends, then I have this kind of friend, I have work friends, I have like family friends-ish, then I have friends. And that distinction also, between these different kinds of friends, maybe on one hand that is helpful, and on the other hand it feels like it's too complicated. So if you think about that yourself, right, what are the main elements of a friendship for you? And they might be different in some regards to me. Maybe I'm someone who really, like, friendship is a term that I would only use for very, very close, long-term, like, friendships and connections with people that I fully trust. But someone else would say, like, no, like, my neighbor is my friend. And I almost, or my AI is my friend in some ways. I don't share everything with my neighbor and be like, every time I'm like, yo, please help me out here, and like, listen to this and that happened to me. But they're here, right? They're looking out. We're looking out for each other. So I think challenging that is a great great way to think about building sort of your support system in a way, right? And broadening that, generally, the sense of friendship and connection, which comes back to sort of the individualism that we started off with, is so crucial, because we do need each other, right? We do need each other, and we need different kinds of social connections, and diversify those connections. I think that's the most crucial. So yes, I need a few close friends, or maybe at least one that I can really turn to, and then I also want other people around me. Like, it's kind of like the different kinds of ways how we build connections, and also how we bridge to others that are maybe further off.
Yeah, and I know we're closing up on some time here, but I think individualism, and you spoke about social media, the trajectory of social media, and the idea of what having friends means has changed.
Yeah.
And it's defined by how many likes, follows, influencer kind of lifestyle that I have. Not to everyone. I'm using a generic statement. Yeah, I know it's not everyone. And the definition of a friend means different things, not just from a generational perspective as well. You have people that live very, very prior technology, that live in a little village town, that that was their now you've got, as globalization has increased, the idea of friend has changed.
Yeah.
I wish I could go talking on forever, but I think I'm going to try and wrap this up with a few rapid fire questions that I think Erkin's going to support me with. Erkin, do you want to kick it off?
Yes, I would like to start it with what are how would you describe in 3 words, like what are the 3 key elements that you would describe 3 words when it comes to like a flourishing person, like how would you do that, like in 3 words? Like what's a flourishing person to you with your experience and expertise?
A flourishing person.
Yeah.
In 3 words. Compassionate. Giving. And centered.
I love that.
I know it's really hard in 3 words, Monika, so I know there's a lot more.
And I had one last question for me. Like I had these 2 key things, but for people that are slowly getting closer to this whole AI talking aspect, which I'm one of those people, I'm not gonna lie, I love talking to my ChatGPT 4.0, especially when it is about a certain field, because like when I get answers from people, it's like, is it correct? It's not correct. Like an AI too, but like, I love that rapid answer of like finding that information and having a brainstorming session. But what is your brief, super on point, like in 1 sentence or 2, how would you describe your suggestion to people who are getting too towards that? Because sometimes people don't know what's good for them necessarily, and I've seen like a couple of interesting researches where students vote the professors, like a different type of professor, but the professor they voted less for, those classes they were doing better because they just lean towards easy, but then they don't learn. So like what would be in 1 or 2 sentences that you would tell a person, like, this is what I would recommend an individual to do that is getting too attached in this virtual world rather than a real world?
That is already getting attached more to the virtual world, you
yes,
say?
or maybe in the virtual, it doesn't have to be AI, but like just super virtual, lacking the social life. What would be in 1 or 2 sentences that you would tell them, like, do this or be this, or
First, I would say it's okay. That's just me being like, that's okay. And it being, being connected in whatever way is important. And if you are someone who is more virtually connected or like feels like you're lacking real life connections, that's an amazing insight. Like that's such a great place, to be in, and nothing to be ashamed of. And I think there's more people who will relate to that. At the same time, I guess be curious about something and set yourself a really, really low, realistically achievable, goal to like do this one thing outside and do something really, really small. That doesn't give you a whole like, panic attack or like social anxiety momentum or whatever. But that sparks your curiosity and your joy, like something that gives you joy. I would say that probably.
That's awesome. That's a brilliant one. Be curious. That's what I took from that, which is very, very a great suggestion. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, I think we have to be wrapping up. But Monika, for those that want to find you and listen to your work and connect with your work, where's the best place for them to connect with you?
Yeah, I think my newsletters, I write a newsletter on Substack, and also I host events online and in person. I'll be doing more in the coming months, and I guess the best place is probably my LinkedIn or my Instagram. Yeah, or my website, which are all under my name, under my full name, Monika Jiang, which there are not so many of because it's like a weird combination of names. It's like a Chinese last name and a Greek or German, I'm not sure, first name. So people are like, Yeah. So there's just one like Chinese doctor, I think, living somewhere in the middle of Germany who has the same name combination. And I'm always like, it's just you and me here on the internet. Anyway, yeah.
All right,
You
amazing.
should invite him for a coffee or something, you know, like
Yeah, exactly.
I want to
like,
know your
"Hey,
story. What's going
who
on?
are you?" Exactly.
All right, Monika, thank you so much.
Thank you both.
We really enjoyed having you. We'd love to join you on one of your podcasts sometime soon, hopefully. But thank you so much.
Thank you.
And we'd love to see you again here too. Like this was not, enough.
Yes. Thanks so much.